where you are. Really, great day yesterday. Thank you so much for coming back. I think we all, after all the different sessions, really understand now, as Britta said, what did she say? The 4 C's: clear, concise, cohesive, and consistent. And it's interesting that she summed up basically all of us in those 4 different sentences. And, a continuing theme today is really basically how we're going to get you really ready for the international market, and, really just giving you inside information of what is happening in the industry. I'm shifting a bit. I really went through all of the questions that we went through or that were asked yesterday, and I'm bringing forward some information that I was going to wait to discuss. So I will talk a tad bit of pricing today, but I'm really going to get more into the different market segments. A lot of the questions being asked, I want to address them today and just kind of just get us right into it and keep moving. Really excited right after my session. We have Sunny Delat, who is a textile and apparel and just a source of knowledge genius. Really excited. He's going to give us an introduction to African textiles. There has been a lot of buzz around the globe, very interested in, like I said, the different types of regions in Africa, understanding the different types of textiles. So we're really excited to have such an expert tell us a bit about what is happening on the continent and the different regions, because there is a lot of misconceptions and confusions about the different regions and the history. And there's such beautiful textiles and just amazing items from Africa as a whole. And it's exciting to learn the different regions. After that, we'll take our lunch break, and then we will have Gregory Sampson. I think made it very clear that transparency in your supply chain impact statement is quite important. Trust, right? We kept saying that every single person yesterday. Gregory Sampson works with T4SD. He helped build the platform. And it's a great platform that shows basically transparency in your supply chain, no matter how large your company is. It's really a great platform that you can show buyers, local, international, national, regional, your suppliers. You can even have your suppliers register. So there's really transparency. I've been looking for a platform now for over a year and a half that I really liked. And I'm delighted that ITC has this free platform that we all can utilize and that buyers feel comfortable working with. Then after Gregory, we're really lucky today. Like I mentioned, we have 2 amazing jewelry designers, Nashreen and Selena from Lebanon. They've really mastered the customer service part. They really understood what to do during COVID. And they're really going to be bringing a lot of insights into how you can actually combat currency fluctuations and how you actually grow your business during very trying times. And they're really going to explain to us too as well how they work with their supply chains, artisans, and really just developing those different channels and taking control as much as possible of the supply chain. So really exciting day. I also just want to reiterate, this is a lot, okay? We are throwing a lot at you in 2 days. So we understand that. And I want everyone to realize, we're going to get really into detail each week on the different topics. So don't worry, we're not just going to leave you hanging with these topics. We're really going to dive down step by step what you need to do in each of these areas. So we're really going to focus on your product, how you develop that, assortment, really getting deep into the product part. Then we're getting into pricing, which is so, so, so important. It's more than just basically, like Britta was saying, don't just throw a price on it and think that you're going to sell it. There's a lot that goes behind that. Then we'll really be getting into how do you promote that, right? Basically your omni-channel, what channels work best for you to promote your product, and then placement. Where do you actually sell your product? What works the best for you? Not every region is the best for everyone. I think there is this misconception that you just go to the US and you make $1 million. Oh, I'll just go to anywhere in the EU. I'll go to Australia. When actually a lot of our business is regionally as well. So taking advantage of that. So I'm just going to kind of dive right into this and kind of start to answer a lot of the questions that were coming through on the wall. And then many messaged me in the evening. So I just want to kind of explain how does this all work? Okay. I think we think that buyers just go, we're going to focus more on the wholesale side right now in this part of it. But I think buyers, we just think like, oh, I'm just going to go to a buyer and they're going to buy. And it's funny, I've worked with over, is it now almost 3,000 businesses? Whoa. But really directly interacted with 1,500 in over 90 countries. And I crack up every time. Everybody I meet says, well, can't you introduce me to buyers? And I'm like, okay, what's your average price point? Who's your customer? Where do you see yourself sitting on the shelves? What markets do you see yourself in? Are you luxury, contemporary? What is your one-liner? And majority of people can't ask me that or can't answer that. And we want to make sure that you are really making the right decision. I could introduce you to any buyer, but if your product is not right, I'm wasting your time and the buyer's time. So I want to show you also too as well how the process works of these big, big companies. That is why I really truly believe, like Britta was saying yesterday, those of you that have heard me speak before, boutiques and smaller retailers are a great asset. They do not have all of this bureaucracy that I'm about to be showing you and politics and levels and levels and levels of approvals that need to be done. And like I said, they're also really trying to figure this out, and they're really going through such an interesting time. Like I was just reading articles this morning about how, again, Net-a-Porter now is shifting. Farfetch is shifting. We're seeing, all these different multi-brand retailers trying to figure this out and trying to take different market shares back that they've lost. Well, it's going to take them a while, right? So, and this is why the reason, how we get here is basically, here's a trade show, right? Or here's New York Now. Here's Alessi, an internationally known decorative home brand. How did they get here? Okay. How did Saks make that decision? What was behind that? How did they go from a trade show to being, placed and being a partner with Saks Fifth Avenue? Well, remember this famous image, this image, it's become famous now. This image of the Stanley Korshak buyers sitting there, and you see these plans right here. Well, before Stanley Korshak goes to a meeting, just like all of us buyers, there's a whole process behind that. I think that people think like, oh, again, we just go to fashion shows and we get to go with our gut and pick what we think is the best. That would be about 15% of our job. The majority of our job is basically running numbers all the time, making sure that we are hitting margin targets, and we are sitting in front of them, looking at what their sales were last year, what was done regionally, what key categories worked, and it's something called an open to buy. But in addition to open a buy, so I'm going to be giving you these links. This is a general open a buy tool that's free. But I'm just going to show you the reports that we did at Bergdorf Goodman. Basically, this is what we would look at every single week. We would be looking at our sales, our markdowns, our receipts, and we would have a plan that we would have to match. This was agreed upon a year in advance, okay? We would literally go, a planning department would meet, and basically, actually before the planning department, the big board of these different companies would say, these are our targets for next year. Then each area, so you would see, let's take Bergdorf Goodman, a Saks, a Harrods, Net-a-Porter. They have an apparel section and then a non-apparel section. And then under those different sections are different divisions. They'd be heads of those different divisions. The different divisions, or the different areas, the non-apparel and the apparel, are given plans. And then it trickles down and everyone is given basically these margin plans. If you as a buyer do not hit your sales plan and margin plan, you are fired. I don't know how to put it any other way. So it is very, very frightening for buyers to work with new businesses. We are also given something called a regular priced sales plan. This is a document directly from Bergdorf's. It's old, so I can show it to you. It's many years old, the information on here. But it's basically showing the different seasons. So it's kind of boring, actually, at this part of the business. But this is why buyers, when they're talking to you, if you don't know your margin, if you don't know key information about your business, This is why they're terrified of working with you, right? They have a markdown plan. So basically, we will sit there with the buyers. I also worked in the planning side of some big organizations. The planning team will sit with the buyer and say, this is what we think your plan will be. We think of this current season, a percentage of this will be, let's say, resort. Another part of this will be basics, which basics are items that we do not mark down. Then we have, pre-fall, let's say, then we have spring. We have different seasons coming in. And basically, we have something called sell-through. And basically, we have to usually sell 60% or more at regular price. That is the goal. Nobody really wants to, if you go below that, if we have to mark you down, then I'm now hitting my margin, or I'm not hitting my margin plan as a buyer, and I'm very scared. A buyer has the right to come to you and say, I would like markdown money now from you, or you need to take these goods back. Why? She is terrified of the fact that she now is not going to hit her margin targets. On the other side of that as well, if you delivered late to her, let's say, if you, didn't even deliver at all, she took money from the company that she held for your goods that she needs sales for that plan. She has a monthly sales forecast that she has to hit every single month. If you don't deliver on time, she's not going to hit that, right? It's a risk for her. So this is why we became very broken as an industry, because basically what would happen is buyers are becoming afraid to work with emerging businesses because they would go to their go-tos. So this is, I'm showing you numbers here, but it's okay. This has been many years. But the planning system is exactly the same. But you're noticing here key names. I'm showing you, maybe not everyone would know these names, so that's why I'm showing it, but you see how it is. So in Division 50, we have something called soft accessories, and we have many different departments. Well, one buyer is not buying all of soft accessories. So that's why it's so important for you as we go along. We're really going to be showing you, where do you fit in this market? You could be in jewelry, and there's so many different categories of jewelry, right? In soft accessories, we have scarves. Patricia Underwood is a hat designer. Laura Piana is one of the top cashmere brands. And what I'm showing you here is in every company, no matter if you're a mass market, like a Primark, or if you are, moderate, contemporary, or luxury. And I'm going to show you what those different types of merchandise categories are. So I just think you need to understand that being a buyer is quite intense, okay? And with budget cuts over the years and the schedule getting more intense, while they're traveling, they're having to manage all of these things. So what you're seeing there is early receipts as well. Early receipts would be basically your buy is coming early. We're letting that merchandise come in early. So it's very important that you're aware of what that really is. So this is why when people, say to me, oh, my margin is 50, well, that doesn't actually work anymore. So it is so important that you really get a handle on this. And we're going to make sure in future weeks, we're going to dive down really deep into what your pricing structure should be. But it's depressing, I'm not going to lie. And I don't know if many of you, I was at the end of the day yesterday, understood exactly what Britta was saying, but the margins are crazy. So basically, most buyers require 67% or more. So that is between what you charge them. And so this price here, the pin that's not on sale, that $475, you charge them how much, they market, they then put a 60%, 67% or more margin. And in handbags now it's up to 71%. And then in mass market, they mark it up 3 times, almost 300% they mark it up because the margins, or because the dollars or the money is so small, they mark it up as much as they can. So it is a very frustrating part because the buyer gets more than you do. And this is soul crushing for many people. And then we get past it. Okay, so we're going to show you how you do that. But it's very important when we discuss the assortment planning. We're going to really get into why you need to build a range. So it was a great question yesterday that someone asked, and I'm sorry, I have every screenshot, but I don't know who asked this question, and I apologize. I'm forgetting your name. But basically, someone was asking, how do I work my margins from my lower price items to my higher price items? Well, you actually have to have the same margin for the buyer, but from going from the cost to the wholesale, that is where you have freedom. But like Britta said, and we always say, all of us, you can't overcharge, right? Your competition, where you're sitting on the shelf, right? Or where you're sitting on a different website, you can't be more than your competition, and you need to know where you stand. So I always say when I'm working with designers, you have to know that price because it controls then the fabrics you're going to be selecting. I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up about pricing. The fabrics that you're going to be selecting, the trims that you're going to be selecting, everything that you do, you need to know, okay, wait, I never can charge at more than $30 wholesale, okay, for this, because this is where the end game is. And the buyer that I'm working with, wow, she needs to hit these different margins. Also as well, how the process really works is, there's so many meetings involved in bringing on a new designer. So for instance, I'm just going to keep picking on Bergdorf's, and let's pick on Harrods. This is for all different tiers of retailers. So this could be for Primark, this could be for, middle range Marks and Spencer's, we have Selfridges, we have all these different brands in, Dubai, we have all these different amazing, different major retailers. And different buying groups that buy for a lot of stores in the countries that we are in. Basically what happens is either a buyer or a fashion office discovers a brand. They then come in, they then are excited about it. Guess what? They don't have the ultimate approval in these big organizations. If a buyer is out and meets you and finds you and really wants to bring you in, she now needs to get approval from her divisional. That person is over her whole entire division. That person would be over this department. So that's a divisional right there. So that person, there's several buyers that report to her. She then would go to the fashion office with the buyer if the divisional agreed. And then they would go to the overall vice president, that head of all of us, let's say that it's in division 50. They then would have to go to that divisional, and then you're not done. Then you need to go to a planning department for approval. The financial team would have to approve the terms that the buyer negotiated with this particular, with you. And then something called a purchase order, if you're lucky, gets passed. And then that purchase order then would have to be approved by another level. And then wait for it. You think you're done. Then there's something called a routing guide and logistics document that every company will give you. Remember how yesterday I was saying how, a lot of people now are requiring images, a lot of people now are requiring more items. That is all in the routing guide and logistics document. You then literally are told how to pack your goods, how to label your box. I'm not joking. Like literally, if you put the label on the left side and they ask for the right, that's not accepted. And then what happens is, if you do not follow every one of those rules, you get fined by the big companies. So what's fined? They deduct from the money that they're going to give to you from your purchase order that you agreed. They deduct that money from you. And if you do not hit that cancel date, if you do not deliver on time, and a cancel date is basically the agreed date and time that you're going to get your goods to an agreed location. If you don't do that, the buyer has the right to cancel that order, okay? So yes, right now things are tricky with supply chain and there's more leniency than there's ever been before. That's not going to stay. Why? Remember I was saying she has to hit sales targets? She has a receipt plan every single month. She has to that EOM is how much stock she's only allowed to have every single month. If she doesn't hit that, if she goes over or under, she's in a lot of trouble, okay? So there's a lot that goes into that. And that is why buyers really like working with people Most buyers really like working with people that know what they're doing, understand what the buyer has to go through, really gets their market segment. And, because of all those different steps I was telling you, right? As a buyer, it's a nightmare to bring on a new brand. I'm not going to lie. And there's so much politics that goes in, and you're just like, oh gosh, here we go, another level, right? I need to partner with you. I don't want to be bringing brands in and out left and right. And that is why many buyers wait 2 seasons, 2 to 3 seasons to bring you on. Why? They want to make sure that you understand aesthetic, that you understand who your customer is, that you'll be delivering the same type of feeling the next season, but differently. You can deliver the same type of customer 2 to 3 seasons, then that way, then I don't have to worry that I bring you in one day that you are doing tailoring, because that's my division, let's say. Oh, and then next season you're a bohemian. Well, whoa, that doesn't work for me. Now I have to go through this whole entire process again and find someone new. My customer is like, wait, I like that brand. Where do they go? So it is very important that you're very true to who you are as a business. You understand what your customer wants. We're really going to get into that design, and it's very important. I cannot stress understanding your assortment. Like Britta was saying, clear and concise, right? That's why buyers are so afraid. And some of you have heard me tell this story before, but I will share with you my biggest blub as a buyer. I was very excited. This is actually the time I was buying jewelry, and I was delighted. We were doing this big French atelier event, bringing these, famous jewelry designers in France. Had never been in the United States. So excited. Holy macanoles, it was a disaster for me. When I say disaster, we were publicizing this big event. They were handling landing the goods. Because most of the jewelry industry is on consignment, they didn't fill out the right paperwork. Their goods were held in customs because they never shipped to the US before under consignment. They did it as a carnet. It was such a mess that I was lucky that I still had a job, okay? That stays with me. And every buyer has a story of working with a new brand to the market where we live in fear. So this is why we are stressing these key components, trust. And you're going to hear I talk about shipping and logistics so much. And I just, you become shipping goddesses. Your life, I know most of you are already trading and doing this, but you need to really pay attention to, what your product is. We'll have a whole session on freight and duty and logistics, and you're going to go, really, Tara, that is just not fashion to me. But sadly, there is no separation between the beautiful creative part of our business and these key components of logistics, shipping, freight and duty, understanding this stuff, the sad stuff, the boring stuff, right? The numbers part of it is such a key part of, our business. So I'm switching a bit because I just really want, to explain how this all works. So I just some key points to remember. You're going to hear me say this over and over. Those of you that are just meeting me for the first time, I reiterate this all the time because things are constantly changing. So again, key points to remember: just because it's a trend, anything you're hearing, today, doesn't mean that it's right for your business. But the margin targets that I'm talking about, I'm sorry, there is no wiggle room. You have to stay in that if you're going to be working with some of these key retailers. Each business has a different customer. So I just want to remind everyone, what model you pick, needs to be the right model for your business. But keep in mind, the consumer has changed drastically and is constantly changing. It is something to be very aware of, and you better be in tune with your customer daily now, because that model will be shifting a lot. And it is very important that you keep following those different trends. We're going to talk to you about how you stock your customer, but that's very important. I think you get it. The industry is like, influx, right? It's like, it's chaos, but in a good way because you can go around it. But it's important that you keep abreast of those changes because you don't want to be going one way and all of a sudden it's going the other way. So please conduct significant research before making a decision. An amazing question yesterday that I get asked a lot, and I'm so glad it was asked yesterday. Who does the research? A consultant? Should you pay someone that's in that market, or should you? You should take control of your business. You need to do a lot of these things on your own at first, and then you can bring on someone once you've mastered them. And it's all these different techniques involve your employees, involve your artisans, involve your supply chain. More than welcome to have them take these different webinars, but you need to do it. You need to really go in, research these different areas, research if you're now going on e-commerce, research, the different markets, what model is right for you. I gave you a lot of great links yesterday. Make sure, again, you're reading those all the time. I'll be giving you even more as we go along, where you're going to be constantly looking at that information. I just want to also just some key points that I just always like to say in the beginning, because, I've met so many people, again, like I've said, and these are things where I find people really don't limit their risks. You have to really look at your product, okay? This is where I like the fact yesterday, everybody said, slow down, right? It's not a race. Slow down. Slow down when you take the pictures. Slow down with your social media. You don't have to post 1,000 times. And what did Britta say? Be clear, concise, slow down, know your pricing. Well, you have to slow down and take an honest look at your product. Really, if you're saying to me, this happens to me so many times, people say to me, oh, I'm ready. Let me meet a buyer. My product's great. I just need to change my zippers, my trims, my buttons. Yeah, I can't really get the stitch right on that, but don't worry, I'll get it done. If that's a problem, you're not ready, right? So you need to really work on that while you're doing your research plan, while you're doing the other items. Please do not go and send pictures to a buyer or try to book an online appointment with them until you have that in order, right? Supply chain right now is critical. It's crucial. It is survival for your business. You need to master that before now you go off into, exporting and expanding your business nationally. I have so many people who say to me, oh, my national customer, she doesn't care, but she does, right? So really make sure you master all of that for your customer base. And I cannot wait for you to hear the women this afternoon, because they've done that. That's been something that they've really had to work on, especially with supply chain issues in Lebanon. They have some really good advice. Another thing too, as well, do not overpromise. I think that's very important too, as you're meeting with buyers, as you're going along, again, it's a crazy world out there with this supply chain and logistics. So those of you that are, really ready and you're already starting this, just be careful, okay? Really make sure that you're not overpromising. Why? You get one shot, right? And if you make a mistake, you're up against a buyer that's going through all of this. And it's your reputation. We all speak. I don't think people realize what a small community internationally we are. I mean, it's amazing. I'll be at a trade show and someone's met designers that I know from, I was blown away. This one buyer was like, oh, I know, I don't want to say the brand's name, but from Uzbekistan. I was like, wow, this is so cool how our industry has really become so intertwined globally. But if you make a mistake, that buyer then will tell another buyer, right? Don't work with them. So really make sure you don't overpromise. Know your budget as well. I see many people, they don't finish maybe all the webinars or something, and they just go and they're like, I'm going to hire a web developer to do all of this and put all their money into that. Well, no, there's tools and things that you can be using for free. You have to really know what this is. And you never should jeopardize your business with expansion. You need to keep your current client base while you are going and basically expanding. You never want to replace, you want to maintain and grow, and that is very critical. You really need to know, again, the scalability of your supply chain. Like I was saying, product quality, but scalability of your supply chain is something you need to be working on now. Even if you're only, producing, minimal quantities at this moment, if you want to be going into the export market, it's huge opportunity. You don't want to be sitting in front of a buyer and they're like, I want a container load, which has happened to many people that I've worked with. And they're like, right. How's that going to work? So you really want to be thinking of different, collectives. You want to be thinking of who can you collaborate with? Are there other designers that if you did get an order that you could tap into their chain, split it with them? Really learning and thinking about how you can do this. Again, supply chain right now, a lot of us work with international or local suppliers, but most of them get their products from the international market. So I saw this past year, so many people that would say to me, oh no, I get my zippers down the road. Where does your supplier get the zippers from? And you need to really pay attention to that. And that is where looking at, these different supply chains that you normally wouldn't look at, your value chains, looking at your communities, looking at the people that you normally wouldn't work with, and seeing how can you really tap into that and keep everything very close and lots of control. That's very key to being successful over the next year. You're going to make a mistake, right? The majority of us, let's just be real. It happens, okay? Have a backup plan. And you don't want to make it so it's so costly that that's it ruins your business. Be very careful, right? Budget and think about how much do you want to spend on these different expansion activities. Right now, time to me is what I'd like to spend. I don't like spending money right now. Minimal as possible. I don't believe in big monetary expansion plans. I'm into calculated risks right now, especially, right? It's going to be another crazy year. So just really make sure that you have a backup plan at always. The power of knowledge is everything. I meet so many people that bounce around different programs. They're with SheTrades and they're with another program and they're here. Then they hire this consultant and that consultant, and I'm going to bring in this social media team. You need to be grounded with who you are as a company. You need to be, I'm not making that up when I'm saying you need to take that hour to 2 hours every Thursday or Friday, or whatever works for you in the weekend or the evening. And you need to be reading and reading and reading and reading and reading, watching what's happening. You're going to really get to know where to go for your industry. We're going to help you again, even more so, but you have to be the leader of your business. Never let other people dictate where you're going to go. Now, don't be stubborn, because some of us can get stuck on something, but you have to really take that control and start really reading what is out there. Read the industry, pay attention to it, look at everything, watch your competition, because then when you want to hire a consultant, as you're growing and you want to bring on more people into your team, or as you're developing your employees, you then know what needs to be done. You're not letting other people steer your company. And then what's happening is if you don't do this, you're constantly spinning. So you really need to take control of your business. That was my little lecture. And now I just kind of want to explain again, these importance of what's happening in the market. So let's go back to what it's like to work with the different buyers. You see now the pressure that they're up against. You see these crazy figures. I don't know about you, but I remember when I first started working and buying, I just was like, oh, this is, I guess my business degree really is working here. And I had a little bit of background. I have a shipping background as well. I know I'm confusing. And I remember going, who would have thought these, business and shipping parts would be, and logistics would be so beneficial to me as a buyer, in addition to just liking fashion, right? So this is why buyers ask these questions. You're going to get these slides, and I want everyone now as well, before maybe you even have the next webinar next week with Aiden, be good for you to sit down and think about this. Now, we're going to go into more detail. Britta is really going to help you craft your brand story. But this is why the buyer wants these questions, right? She asked them, like the minute I'm saying booth, now it's virtual. Booth is just basically your phone call, but I just call it the booth. It's just easier. The first interaction you have with her, she's going to say, what is your brand story? And she doesn't want to hear like, I started this. No, quick, one-liner, boom, 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 boom. Who is your customer? The customer is such a powerful question. And you'll see when I'm talking about the different market segments, that's where now I can tell if you are a new to the market. And I can actually really, by this page right here of questions, I know if you're serious if I need to continue the conversation or if I just move on. So, what is your retail price range? And we're going to have a whole session on how you deliver this meeting, but it's important that you're aware of this. So your retail price range is that smaller range. The question yesterday where someone was saying my lower and higher price points, you want to make sure it's clear and concise as much as possible. Now, we are going to have things like exposure or handbag line. You may have some keychains that are very introductory price points. You don't really want to throw that in there. If your price point's between like $50 and $150, that's kind of where you want to stay. You don't want to say your $10 keychain, right? So it's important that you're aware of that, and that tells the buyer, where do you sit? Or do you go with me? Do you go with me in this division? Do you go with me in handbags? Or do you go with my counterpart that's in the American designer side? Okay, you know what? Her price point isn't for me, so now I'm going to move on. So that is why these questions are so, so, so important. What are your top sellers? What's done well for you? This also shows me too, do you understand what I'm talking about? Do you get sell-through? Do you understand the marketplace? So that's why prior to going and meeting with buyers, this is why I never introduce people to buyers right away, because I need to make sure you're ready, right? And this is where I'm giving you exactly what happens during a market appointment. So there's a lot of prep work, like Britta was saying, to go into market. So this is the biggest tell-all right here, this question too. Sorry, I don't know, clap, but I get very excited about it. What is your, sorry, I'm just making sure my sound's working. What is your markup? Well, remember Britta was saying yesterday she was using a 2.7. She was using different numbers. So that's something called a markup factor. That's because we're lazy. We're a bit like, I don't want to do the math. What is it? Just multiply the wholesale by the retail and that's it. But it's really a percentage, right? So it's basically, let's say 67%. That's going to come from these plans here, right? So that tells me right away, do you know what you're talking about? A lot of people tell me 50%, that's too low for me. The majority of people now, that was many years ago, that was accepted. Some boutiques do 50, but the majority now we're at 67. Suggested retail, that tells me as well, if you're giving me a suggested retail that's at 50% or lower, I know you're not ready for the big leagues, as I call it, right? So you want to really be able to answer these different questions. We're going to spend a lot of time in talking about sizing in the production part of it. We're going to be talking about delivery dates as we go forward. What are selling dates? How long has your brand been in business? But these key components, we're really going to be spending lots of time going forward. But it'll be really good for you, again, like I said, prior to your meeting with Aiden next week, start to go through this and think of these questions. Download the slides, or I think you're able to download them, if not, 2 screenshots, and really begin to think about this as we're crafting and going ahead. We're going to have a whole webinar just on production, probably actually 2, because now we're getting more into the 3D side of it as well. So this is why, what are your minimums, right? So remember Britta was saying yesterday about minimums, don't make it too high. Minimums can really, basically with the test buy situation, because everything's virtual, you don't want to limit yourself too much. Yes, you need to make money, but you also don't want to limit yourself into different markets. So it is really important you're aware of that. Where do you produce your product, right? That's that I can't think of the word, transparency. There we go, my brain's fried. And as well, I want to know, is that going to be really hard for me to get? Oh, wow, I'm thinking of the supply chain right now. That is far. So that's in China. I'm not going to get those goods for a long time. That person thinks they're going to get it to me tomorrow. They're not, because I'm still waiting on a container that's sitting outside of LAX or, outside of, let's say in Rotterdam, right, in the Netherlands. So basically just really be prepared that you need to really become a master of these questions. You need to basically be, again, a goddess of all levels of your business. Sustainability, I think you guys get this from yesterday, but I just want to reiterate again, you really need to be on your A game with this, okay? If you're not sustainable, don't even go there, because you will be called out. I've had brands as well, just so that we're aware, I've had brands that basically, they have, didn't one part of their supply chain, they weren't sustainable. They were honest about it with with buyers, and it really did, help them, with the buyer. They felt more trust with them, and they were okay with bringing that on. That part of the supply chain, they were fine that they weren't 100% sustainable. So just really be aware of that. Again, I'm rushing through this, but I'm having this here so you can kind of see why we're stressing upon these different categories, kind of crafting the whole entire program so that when you're sitting in front of a buyer, you can quickly fire these questions off. We're going to show you how you even have that market appointment virtually as well, which is really, really important. Shipping and delivery dates. Cannot tell you again how much of your life will be shipping. I feel like I would crush dreams every time I talk about shipping. If you hate shipping now, you're really going to hate it now. You're going to become you're going to love shipping. You're going to become like a logistics, again, goddess by the end of this program. You're going to be everyone you meet. I'm telling you, it's going to be part of your conversation. I'm a little worried that no one's on the wall right now, but usually at this point, I'm having people like posting, different recommendations. Who do you use? So it's really going to be when we go into that whole section, you're going to basically you're going to form a network after that. I won't allow you not to, because we all need each other in the shipping craziness. Finance is the most key important part. It's amazing to me. I have now been to, how many countless trade shows as a buyer, as selling, the amount of brands when you go, all right, I want to do it. Let's do the order. They don't know how to do it. Like, how do I pay you? So what is your order process? We're going to show you actually how that happens. The whole process from a purchase order or from a pro forma to a purchase order to, the whole entire process. We're going to walk you through that and what you should be giving a buyer. Deposits right now are tricky. Just so everyone's aware, some buyers are all about it. The majority of buyers, though, still, because of COVID and they've been burned, many organizations don't allow for deposits, but that shifts. It always comes in waves, depending on how desperate they are for product, right? Do you accept credit card payments? A lot of us sometimes can't. So you need to figure that out. It is so strange to me how a lot of the American buyers, it's just so hard for them to do bank transfers, where in the rest of the world, we all can do bank transfers like that. They just are not bank transfer type of people unless you're a huge, huge organization. That is because in most banks in the US, you just can't go online and do an international transfer. You have to go into the bank unless you're a certain size. So, a lot of us are looking at that market. It's something to be aware of how you do that. PayPal isn't in a lot of our countries, right? So what other forms can you use to, process the payment? So again, those questions are crafting. I don't want to spend, because I'm looking at the time here, I can't go into so much detail today on every single one of them, but each of our webinars will be answering every one of those questions. And literally, we're going to close in February before we all go to SheTrades Global online or in person, or being part of it in the event and starting to do buyer outreach for spring 2022. Basically, we're going to show you actually too as well, like how you do that online and conduct the appointment. So remember yesterday I was saying we're returning to normalcy. Thank goodness there is some, and Britta was saying it's still in flux, which she is correct, right? So we're both correct in what we're saying. The schedule's getting back to normal, but our supply chains are still a bit, right? But we are, these delivery calendars are still there. Now, yes, there's still that big, prior to COVID, and then during COVID even more, demand for immediate, this buy now, wear now, right? Which is really hard. A lot of the retailers, really want that, but if you're in decorative home and you need to do a container load, not everyone can do that right now, right? And some of these key, outerwear pieces, these key categories, in men's market, things like that, there's just no way we can do that. So it's still keeping with consistency. We saw it with the fashion weeks, but this is what these different deliveries are, these markets, right? So pre-fall is basically November, December, and then it delivers in May through June. Very small. It's a tiny little market. Fall is usually our biggest category. Why? Because, in the EU and in the US, it is a very, very big season where people, outerwear, so the price points are higher, and that's usually the driver. Pre-fall and fall usually account for 60% of the business. But here's the cool part. because we are now finally realizing in the globe or on the globe that some of us, oh my goodness, when it's fall, it's spring somewhere else, right? So this pre-spring category came about. I used to call resort and pre-spring the same. They kind of were, but pre-spring is now dominated resort. Pre-spring comes in, it's more commercial. It used to be a 10% part of our whole entire buy. Some for people, it's 20%, right? That's crazy. Why again? Because in South Africa, you're going into summer when we're going into winter, right? So when those deliveries are hitting, you need those goods, right? So it is really important that that category, and that market happens in May and June and July a little bit, and it's a really key growth category. It's if you can tap into that. And then Roberta was saying trans-seasonal. So trans-seasonal are goods that basically, because a lot of us are going that way because of these different markets that we're all living in, and it's getting warmer in some of the key, whatever your stance is on global warming, the past couple of winters has been a bit warmer than normal in some of the markets. So trans-seasonal has really become a really key category. But you still have to present those collections, and most of the buyers are looking at market around these times. Now, if you're in jewelry and you're in decorative home, you have a little bit more leeway. The real, seasonal categories of your business would be in those block points. Men's does start about a year in advance sometimes, but they've been morphing more into this calendar. And then again, the decorative home, the jewelry, the basics, handbags, your basics, that category that is just the same over and over and over again, you're in market pretty much all the time, and you're really, really lucky. Here's just a bit about what's been happening for this up and coming, the fashion weeks, the different markets. It's been ending. I rented a room, but we have a couple more key fashion weeks after that. But this is the crux of it. So remember I was saying yesterday, our system is broken. We're tired, right? This is why. This is basically for the season that we're going into. Buyers are constantly in market, right? Now, not everyone would go to every single category of this, but still they're in market a lot, right? And that's a lot to manage, right? Like you have to go to these different fashion weeks, you're managing these numbers. So you need to be cognizant of a buyer's time. And you'll hear when we talk about the buyer outreach, why I am so adamant about how you approach a buyer and putting yourself in their shoes, because they're tired. You're tired, they're tired, right? So you need to really build that trust because they're seeing so many brands, right? Now it's easier than ever to reach them, but securing them is hard, right? Because you need to demonstrate all the things we've been talking about the past couple of days. These are some major trade shows, but remember what I said, until you learn your customer, these trade shows may not be right for you, okay? And trade shows right now are kind of like Britta was saying, they're tiny right now. So they're expensive, and maybe that's not right for you. Maybe you do the online portion of these businesses in the beginning, and that's the cool part about what's been happening. And you don't necessarily need a trade show. Biggest misconception in the globe is that you need a trade show. Like Britta was saying, you can do outreach, you can reach out to them LinkedIn, but you need to have everything ready before you do that. I just really want to clarify as well, there is this misconception about fashion weeks, and I know I do my voice when everyone teases me that I do my fashion voice, but fashion weeks really are not just walking down the runway. So, I realized, I should have put up a picture of all the influencers sitting there the other day. Susie Menkes, who used to be the international fashion editor for Vogue, that is now retired but still travels, she posted how the world has changed, basically. Now she's more free. She can say these things. But it was all influencers at the fashion show. It used to be we'd sit there, all the key fashion offices would be front row, and buyers would be, depending on your level, would be second row. And then you wouldn't be doing your buys from there. You're going to the showroom. And honest with you, I just was like, I didn't even enjoy the fashion shows by the end of it. Just get me to the showroom because I really wanted to touch, feel the product. And you would get a better feel of what the collection was. So someone, let's say like Dries Van Noten, he would have, oh my gosh, like doing that market appointment would be quite intense, right? What he would show on the runway, imagine that times, 100. I was on a DV or Diane Van Westerberg appointment, and you see the runway, and then you now need to go in and go to the showroom. You're having millions of people around you. You're having to do your buy right there, right? Because of this calendar, you have only certain dates to do it. So usually spring 2020 spring market, so this spring market 2022, I cannot speak, would be closing at the end of October. But normally you want to close that buy quite quickly because you now need to move on to the next. So then you have in front of you all your reports, your brain's kind of fried, but you are constantly in market. So it's not just this walking down runways, trade shows. You are really basically writing orders. You're writing a checkbook for the next season, right? You're basically spending the budget that you've been given. So I just want to really, squash that. And, a lot of people think, oh, we need runway shows. We need these. Runway shows really are not enticing to buyers. They're exhausted of them. Presentations work much better. We want to see the product. I want to touch it. I want to feel it. I don't want to waste my time with the glitz and the glam. It's great once in a while. Hey, it's all great. We love it. But I'm here for work, and I'm here to really, see your product. I want to be able to feel it. I want to be able to see what it looks like on a person, and I want to do it quickly. I don't have a lot of time, right? And buyers are notoriously late because basically they're constantly trying to balance all of these different showroom appointments. If they really like a showroom appointment, you will stay a little bit longer. And sometimes we're booked like 20 appointments in a day running around. And now with the virtual, it's even worse, right? So I just want to really just clarify that because I just get asked that question all the time. I'm going to do a fashion week. You don't want to. You don't want to. You want to do a presentation, or you want to do a showroom, or you want to figure out a way of getting your products to the buyer that they can see them after you've made the initial meetings and steps. Again, I put these dates up yesterday, but it's important that you're aware of all the different trade shows as you're getting to know your customer, as you're figuring out where you fit in the market. Start looking at the different types of shows, different markets. This literally Modem and Trade Fair dates list every single one in the globe. And there's amazing different shows. Sometimes Asia will be better for us, sometimes regionally. Dubai has amazing shows for the region. South Africa has a lot of shows. And there's really some great different shows. Lagos in Nigeria is an amazing show for fashion part of it. And then there's great sourcing shows. But you need to figure out what's right for you. You don't want to be going to Lagos in Nigeria or to Dubai if that market's not right for you, right? That doesn't make sense. Another key thing too as well, I forgot to bring up, where are we? So the fashion week part of it, this is even like trickier as well, because each different region, like for these very big brands and then retailers, each different region has a different contact. So you'll see in Paris Fashion Week, it's all of the African buyers, European buyers, or Paris region buyers, and Australia and Middle East. They're all usually put there, and then the North America, South America buyers are pushed into the US. And then will be some UK buying offices as well. They set up shop for 3 weeks, the Paris team, the people coming to Paris for those buyers, and they're there for a good 3 weeks. So that is also too trying to navigate, where do you fit in? Then there are buying offices in each of these regions. I totally forgot to bring that up. So for instance, at Bergdorf's, we would have a buying office in pretty much all the key fashion markets. And then we'd have hubs, different places if we were ordering from, let's say, like Africa, the continent, which is kind of silly because there's 54 countries, so you need more than one hub. But we would have these different contacts and different, that we could help with logistics. Because again, remember, each of us are buying different things. So there's lots of components that go into that. So you need to really do your research. You don't want to blindly go into a show when you're looking around, you're going, none of these buyers are from my region that I wanted. How did this happen, right? So this is part of, like, we're going to really show you how you do due diligence to pick these shows. Just so you're aware of some of the key markets, this is basically, what does this mean for your calendar and production plan? Not going to get a lot into this right now, but it's important that you're aware of that. We're going to spend a lot of time, but this is why, a lot of people cannot just go 4 to 6 weeks, boom, I'm ready. There's a lot of planning that goes into this. And that is why really taking control of your production and supply chain is very, very important, no matter what, type of production you're doing. If you're doing hand, if you're doing mass, it is very important that you're aware of that, and things will be going wrong. Especially if you're working with a new group of people that are doing handcrafted. There's a lot of communication that needs to be done. And if they don't know you, you don't know them really. So it's really important that you have that in play, but I don't want to spend tons of time on that. But this is just, I get asked a lot usually. And basically the sourcing major trade shows, this is another thing to pay attention to. And I'll be adding a lot more to this. Premier Vision, I love, and Tech World, amazing, amazing, amazing. Source Africa is now, I just realized they just changed their name now. I just forgot the name because Meze Frankfurt bought them. But basically, you can get all of these things online. But again, remember, it's better to work regionally and nationally, especially right now with everything that's happened. So what does this mean? So I've been, saying all these terms, contemporary, luxury, blah, 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 throwing these terms out. Well, like, what are they essentially? In general, we have different market segments. Now, I'm going to show, I'm probably going to have clothing pictures, but this is the main kind of names we use for the different price tiers. Now, within these different segments, we're going to have different segments and different kind of buzz names for our different types of products that we have. There's a lot of products that we're discussing. We're discussing apparel, and then we're discussing accessories and jewelry, So, but within this is kind of where we live. So this kind of defines, these categories define how the companies are set up, right? So the person that is buying mass market will never be buying designer. And then where people get very confused, I have to be honest with you, is the designer contemporary category. A lot of people don't know where they fit. And then they go to the designer person, and the designer person's like, no, you're contemporary, or vice versa. So it is important that you're aware of that, and what are they exactly? So most of us don't do bespoke, but I'm just putting it here. So it's any of us that work with tailors, do one of a kinds, basically couture, made to measure. This really wouldn't be in stores, but some of us do that, and that's okay if you stay there. Like, yes, these big names have a couture element to them, but they usually do couture to sell the rest of their products. It's more of theatrics, but they do make a good business, and many of us on this call probably do very well. If you're doing custom bags, that all kind of fits into this category. Usually it's a higher price range, but it wouldn't be usually your bread and butter. But then again, that's just a general overview. If that's working for you, please do not, change from that. But it is kind of hard to sell to a retailer, right? That's more trunk show based, more, what's the word now? Like one of a kinds, which are a lot of businesses don't like to get into because it's hard to make money on. Designer luxury. So I always meet people that say, oh, I'm a luxury designer. Oh, which price point? $50. No. So there's nothing wrong with being not a luxury designer brand. That's okay. The price point is quite high. I think we all know who they are. Canadize, Prada, Gucci, Balmain, like, the big names, right? Alexander McQueen. I'm looking at Bloomingdale's Dubai. This would be our designer category. Really looking at their price point, you can tell that, this is a designer category. In decorative home would be a William Yoward. It would be, gosh, I'm running out of names here, but the higher price point decorative home names, they would be in the designer side. It's one of the hardest markets to penetrate. I have to be honest with you. Your competition is quite strong. I'm not trying to sway anyone from doing that, but I have to be honest with you. It is a really tough category. This consumer usually is very label conscious. This consumer likes people usually to know how much they're spending. Now, not everyone, but it is the machines that are behind these big design houses. It's very hard to compete with. I'm not saying you won't succeed, but you're up against, really tough competition. But again, you still can succeed in that market. Contemporary is a really cool category. It really became big. I'm going to show my age here in like 2008. And it was this bridge. We called it bridge in the jewelry side, bridge and accessories. And then it was an apparel kind of called bridge. It was between the mass moderate and the designer luxury side. And we find that a lot of these consumers, basically they will spend, more money on a handbag than they would. So they'll buy designer luxury handbags and then wear contemporary clothing. So the price point is perfect. It's really a good category. So Alice and Olivia, she would be a good brand. And I'm showing just apparel, but they also have handbags as well. This is the price point, right? So those of you who don't know, so her price point's like a $200 to $300 at, not really high. And she's pretty much sold at most of the international retailers. So this is an exciting category. Again, the margin here would be 67 to 71%, the same thing for luxury. And geez, it has to stop because we cannot go any higher. I'm hoping, but every year I feel like it keeps going a bit higher. I'm obsessed with the moderate category. Moderate really really became big, I guess, in 2010. It really just took off. Brands like the French brand Cezanne, Mafi Mafi in Ethiopia. We have, Axe, who's in Ghana. We have amazing brands, and Jordan at this price point. And we actually have at this price point today, we have the brand Chateau Jewels. She would be kind of in this moderate to contemporary price point. I've found this just blows out the door. But again, the margins are the same, 67 to 71%. So the intro price point is 50. Your medium is like a 150. Most things don't go over the 200 mark. This is the key category. So that's very hard as a business, price-wise for you, because then the 50, you'd have to basically sell like $15 to $20, right? So it is, though, an amazing category, key growth category. And again, this person, we find the moderate, buys the luxury or the designer shoes, designer bags, designer, real jewelry type items, and will wear moderate clothing. So just got very excited there. Just be aware of that as you are, going along, and as you're planning. It's thinking about also too, when we get into understand your customer, really kind of show how some people wear high-low. I'm just conscious of time. Okay, perfect. Basically now the types of stores and e-commerce within these different segments. So really right now, everybody's online, right? Even there is no, there's bricks and mortar and there's e-com. Most people are moving to a streamlined system. It is interesting though, Saks made an announcement a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of shocking, that now they're separating their buying teams and going to be having 2 separate buying teams. I've been part of many organizations that have done that and it doesn't work. Neiman Marcus, I was there when Neiman Marcus took over Bergdorf Goodman's buying office for one of the divisions I'm in. I don't want to say it. And then they gave it back to us quite quickly because it wasn't working, because we would know the customer a bit better. So most people prefer to have streamlined one buyer for both. Now there will be some key, differences, like Anthropologie. They have a skirt buyer for their online that she only buys for online and separates. The reason being that's a very key category for them. So she basically, it just didn't make sense, but she was aligned already. She was working for the bricks and mortar part of it as well, and was very familiar with the landscape. So there will be exceptions to this rule, but most people are really trying to streamline as much as possible. Again, that could change, right? We're going in many different directions. The industry keeps changing. So this is where, when you're doing your research and you're stalking on LinkedIn, you want to be able to utilize the right terms. So again, just want to quickly, that just reminds me something. Like you see here, they have American designers and then European designers, 2 separate buyers, 2 totally separate buyers for that. So when you're on LinkedIn, you want to be stalking these people. Sorry, I don't know what a word to use in stalk. Research, there we go, research these people. You want to be able, as you're doing your research, going through and you're going, right, okay, now I'm finding the right buyer. Oh, wow, I'm seeing I sit in with here, which we'll be having lots of conversations about that. Where do I sit in? Okay, I know that buyer now That's who buys that product at that store that I want to get into, right? So it's important. Just want to, kind of explain again. I've been talking a lot about the department stores, but I just kind of want to again reiterate this in a more concise way for you and good takeaways. So a department store, or like a net-a-porter, multi-brand, I should call it multi-brand more than department store. It's multi-segment. You're covering many different categories. The assortment range will be from apparel to houseware, decorative home. Very strict guidelines for shipping, pricing, ticketing product, and test buys usually begin at 15K and up. That's really shifted. I really want to say it can be even smaller now, but that's how the main would be 15K, but I have been seeing a little bit tinier, just because of everything that's been happening. Some of the buyers have been burned this past season. The buyer is typically responsible for one area within that market segment. So again, you have the divisional that's the head of all of this, and then maybe she has belts and something else, but not everyone will be the buyer of all those different categories within that group. So it's important to be aware of that. You don't want to reach out to the European designer collection when that person, and when you're really advanced designer, and you want to learn these terms. How you do this, we're going to be showing you where you go and you look on the different websites. Bergdorf's is a great way from the luxury side. We'll be showing you then if you're in moderate, if you're in mass, what terms to be looking for. Key thing is in these big companies, the fashion office, and many levels of people are involved. Anthropology, we had a business that got into anthropology. It was very interesting because this one person had such power with e-com, got in right away, had another brand get in, but had to go through 27 different people because they were also going to be in the store as well. So crazy, right? 27 people. Sorry. It was the craziest thing. Even for me, I went, wow, that is just, I've seen it all. So it just shows you the differences that can be done with these big stores. I love specialty stores. I think specialty stores and boutiques, I really enjoy. There's smaller specialty stores, multi-segment, usually it's more focused on apparel and accessories, but sometimes we'll see now home and other categories coming in. Again, they're less segmented. The buyer is usually responsible for one area versus market segment. So maybe the buyer is responsible for handbags, right? So instead of, being divided between all these different, categories within handbags. So, it is really great to focus on specialty stores and boutiques. Boutiques are just my favorite, my favorite, my favorite, my favorite. And they're just such an easy entry into the market. They can become great partners with you. Exactly what Britta was saying, this past year they have thrived because they know who their customer is more than anyone does. They really understand and really helps you when we're going through and we're doing our market outreach and how you go about that. You're going to learn to find the right boutiques that match your brand. You won't need us to say, oh, introduce me to stores. You're going to figure that out. You're going to find that out. And boutiques are just so great to talk to because they know their customer inside and out. They, have an edited assortment. Like Britta was saying, she has one, is it Palo Alto? She was saying one store that only orders 2 rings from her out of the whole entire collection that they have. But they order so much consistently that they've actually become a really big client, an easy bread and butter. So they know what works for them and they're just great. And again, if you're trying to enter these new markets, it's a really, really great, just great way of testing. Trunk shows will talk a lot about pop-ups with them, partnerships with them. Again, you don't have these crazy restrictions that you would have with a buyer. Usually you're talking directly with the owner, most of these places, or, like a daughter or someone. It's usually very family. It's really great people are usually involved in boutiques. The only thing with boutiques, they did go through a situation where everybody had a boutique and then sadly many of them closed. Now it seems that the ones that are really this past year, like Britta was saying, they figured out really, stay who your customer, and they've done quite well. So you really just want to make sure that you're working people that have been doing this for a while. So there's 2 types of e-commerce buying patterns. I think I mentioned this: one buyer for both the website and e-com, and then separate buyers for store and e-commerce. You really need to be aware of this. This is where stalking on LinkedIn is so important. You need to know everyone's title. Again, I wish when I started my career, LinkedIn existed. Not when I be a buyer, but on the other side, the information that you get is unreal. You can reach out to a buyer, you can try different email addresses, will show you how to do this, but you need to do your research. You have to find this out. You have to stalk them. You have to find out what, area you're trying to get into. Again, power of knowledge. You need to know where you sit. You need to know who are you going to be selling to? Who is your customer? What's your price point? What stores work for you? What's the aesthetic? Then you go and you stalk these people and you really can figure this out. But again, you don't want to be reaching out to the skirt buyer of Anthropologie when you really should be reaching out to the American designer, let's just say, collections person, right? So you want to really make sure that you understand where everyone fits in. The different marketplaces that are out there really have shifted. This dropship model, I brought it up yesterday that I said I wanted to talk about. The dropship model is quite stressful. It's really basically this new phenomenon that it started before COVID, and then during COVID became very prevalent. So you have something like Nordstrom's. Nordstrom's has been using this model a lot. So they have a lot of key, Nordstrom's is a retailer in the States, really renowned for their customer service. They went public and then took the company back. The family really they just believed in the messaging of the store, didn't like how it was heading. That's how powerful they are into understanding their customers. Anyway, they now on their website, they have a marketplace. The majority of the products they do not stock. What they do is basically they work with key retailers or key brands, even emerging brands, and they say, okay, we're putting it up and then you ship it right away. That's a lot. Okay, guys, that's a lot. That is a lot of logistics. Many of us cannot do that. It's risky and it's expensive. You're taking the risk of the inventory part. Then there's a consignment model, which became quite huge prior to COVID. And then during the uncertainty times of COVID, consignment really took off even across all categories. Jewelry, that is just, I'm so sorry for all of you in jewelry. The majority of the different price tiers, even in the mass now, we're seeing some consignment or basically return to vendor type of agreements where basically what you don't sell, you take back. But consignment is now we're seeing a lot of different places. The pre-order model is really, really popular right now. We're seeing Saks Fifth Avenue now has adopted it. This is a designer named Kimberly Goldson. They wanted to bring her in but not take the risk. So basically you're seeing pre-order, you pay for it, and then basically it comes a couple of weeks later. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. So I think you're now seeing what we were talking about yesterday in trends. This is the type of modeling that's been happening. Then we have the purchase model. Yay, that's a good one. The purchase model is where they just buy it, it's theirs, but remember, they have targets to hit, right? Where are my little plans? They have these targets to hit with what they bought. And sometimes if they make a mistake, they have the right to come back to you and say, hey, give me some markdown dollars if you want to go ahead. So it is making sure that when they do purchase it, that it's the right decision. You want to make sure that you're finding a partner. The buyer doesn't have all the power. Yes, they do, but actually you have a lot of power too. If you really know the power of knowledge, if you really know the marketplaces that you're going into, it's easier for you to give a bit more to a buyer because you really know your customer, you know that it's the right place for you to be in. And if you really know your customer and you know what sells well, and Britta will talk a lot about that, of what she's very good at that in a market appointment. She knows certain competition, she sells with them. So I won't say the brand's names, but she knows her rings and necklaces do very well with this person's bracelets, right? They always sell as a set. So she's able, because she can articulate this, she can actually increase her buys with a buyer because she is aware of this different information. So it's really important that you're aware that you have the power as well. You never let a buyer dictate and change who you are just for that one buy. Because remember, you're changing for them, not for you. And then that's not cost effective for you in the long run, right? Because you know who your customer is and you're constantly giving it every season. We talked a bit about this yesterday, but I just really want to clarify that, before I close and open it for questions, and I think Sunny is here too as well, you need the blend between the two. This is my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's right for everyone. You need the blend. And that's why Britta was spending so much time talking about the retail side and then the B2B side. The reason is it's one message. You need to just make sure all of your platforms are aligned, you're clear and concise, like Britta was saying yesterday, and like Agatha, Robbie, and Aiden were saying, you have all of this messaging, everything's, really good trust level for the direct to consumer and the B2B. And because the margins are horrible, let's just be real, because the business, the retailers take all the money, but you want to be moving and taking as much as possible from that market share back into direct to consumer. But it's expensive to keep testing all these markets. So you use these retailers for information, you use them to test. You really are being calculated with where you're moving with your expansion plan. And we'll talk about that a bit more about how you actually go and expand, how you pick the markets to go. But it's very important that you are strategic about this, that you're thinking of, okay, I want to get key information from this boutique. I want to see how this customer base shops me. It's in my benefit to maybe take a bit of a hit to go into this, so I'm going to get information. Britta will tell you she gets amazing information from Net-a-Porter. They tell her, now they won't give her the customers, obviously, because you could just take them, but she knows exactly in each region of the globe where her products do very well, how much she's sold in the Asian regions, and then within the Asian regions, which key markets are very big for her. She knows in the Middle East how she does. So this kind of information, you use the retailers just like they're using you, right? So that then you can grow your business and make calculated decisions on where to go. But if you do not know who your customer is, and we're going to get into that into more detail, you're not going to be able to do any of these things, right? And you're going to be very scattered. So it's very, very, very important that you really, again, slow down, take a breath. It's been 19 months now, is it 19, 20? I don't even know anymore, of total chaos. You want to take a breath. We're all been kind of like, hoo. What is working, what's not working, and really dive down back into who your customer is. And we're going to show you how you go and you can stalk her and really learn about her. But you'll never be able to sit in front of a buyer and properly have a meeting unless you have all of this information. So we just gave you inside documents. Like no one gets these documents, okay? You just saw real open buys from these key retailers, what they're looking at and how this works. So you're really getting a chance now to see, okay, I've got to be a bit more strategic as I'm thinking, okay, I get it now with the pressure that she's under. I know now all those other people are in this decision-making process. You know what? While that conversation is happening with this big retailer, while I'm trying to get in there, I'm going to be focusing on boutiques right now. Going to keep talking to the biggies, but I'm going to be now looking at boutiques because I know I've done all of this work. I know exactly where I fit in. I know if I'm an Alexander McQueen. I know if I'm an Allison Olivia. I know if I'm an Alessi, right? I know who I am, what trade show works for me, what platforms, because I've been doing all this research. So now I'm confident to go ahead with these different types of interaction with the buyers. Our next steps after this, from this point of view, will be, we have Aiden, again, next week. Like I said, he'll be focusing on how you load images, which is very, very important because I think you're seeing all the different things that buyers are looking for. And then I will then continue this and we'll focus on the next part about the market